Today, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make 4 silky smooth animations for your graphics or text within Premiere Pro. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so for the very first animation, I'm just going to drag my graphic into the timeline. I'm going to select that graphic layer, and then we're going to go up to the effects panel and type in transform. We're going to double click on that transform and we're going to head over to the effects control panel. We're going to scroll down, check off this box right here and change the shutter angle to 360. So we're just going to start with the rotation first. So I'm going to drag my blue tracer to the 2-second mark, click a keyframe for the rotation right here. I'm going to drag our blue tracer to the very beginning of the animation, drag that rotation up to about 1 times. Say right there is good. And then I'm just gonna select both of these keyframes, make sure they're in blue. We're gonna right click, ease in, and right click and ease out. We're just gonna drag our blue tracer to that second keyframe, make sure it's right on top of it, right click on this layer, and we're gonna nest it. It doesn't matter what you name it, I'm just gonna leave it as is. And then we're gonna select this nest layer, we're gonna go to the effects panel, and we're gonna add another transform effect. So just making sure you guys have this blue tracer in the same position, check off this check mark, and change the shutter angle to 360. Create a keyframe for the position and scale. We're gonna drag our blue tracer to the very beginning of the animation, change the scale to around 50. Then we're just gonna change this 540 on the position and drag it down until we can no longer see our graphic on screen. We're gonna select all 4 of these keyframes. We're gonna right click, temporal, ease in, right click, temporal, ease out. Now comes the fun part of making them smooth. So I'm just going to open both of these layers up, drag both of these in. Just make sure you're not going up and down because it really messes with the animation. You can just do Control Z to undo. I'm going to drag them in, and then we're going to grab our blue tracer and make sure it's aligned right in the middle of that circle. So you're going to just have to adjust it a little bit so it's right in the middle of that circle. We're going to do the same for the first keyframe of the position. So we're going to select that keyframe, and then we're just going to drag that circle so it's right in the middle of that line. We're also going to have to do this for that rotation layer we previously made. So we're just going to double click on this nest layer, which opens up the nest sequence. So we're just going to scroll down to where our rotation is, and then we're going to open that up. And then we're just going to select that first keyframe, drag the circle right into the middle. We're going to go back to our original sequence. So we can just click X on this nest sequence and we're brought back to our nest sequence. We're going to scroll down and we're going to do the same steps for the second keyframe. So I'm just going to match up the blue tracer to the middle of that second keyframe circle. I'm just going to move it so it matches up. We're going to select the position and we're just going to drag that right into the middle. And then we're going to double click on that nest layer and do the same for the rotation transform layer. We're just going to drag that right into the middle right here. Just click X on the nest sequence and then you're brought back to the main area. The only thing I want to change is the scale. So I'm going to bring my blue tracer to the beginning of the animation and change this 50 to 25. And then if we go ahead and play that back, you can see we have a very nice and clean animation. For our second animation, it's a little more simpler, so we're just going to select our graphic here, go to the effects panel and add a transform layer once again. We're going to drag our blue tracer to about the 1-second mark, just a little bit after the 1-second mark, scroll down to our transform layer and create a keyframe for the rotation. We're going to go to the very beginning of the animation with our blue tracer, crank up the rotation to 1 times 2.5 or whatever that means. We're going to select both these keyframes, right click, ease in, right click, ease out, bring our blue tracer to the middle of this keyframe once again, and then we're going to right click on this layer and we're going to nest this layer once again. We're going to select the nest layer and we're going to add a transform effect to it once again. So we're just going to double click over here, and then I'm going to scroll down to that transform layer, check off this check mark and change the shutter angle to 360. Then since we haven't touched the blue tracer since the rotation animation, I'm going to create a keyframe for the scale, and then I'm going to bring the blue tracer to the beginning of the animation and change that scale to 0. Highlight both of these keyframes, right click, ease in, and right click, ease out. We're going to open up this layer, and then we're going to drag these 2 dots a little bit closer together to create that arcing effect. We're going to match up our blue tracer to the very first circle, and we're just going to line that circle right in the middle. Might take a couple of tries, but you'll get the hang of it. And then we're going to double click into that nest sequence, click on that layer, and then we're going to scroll down to our rotation layer. So we're just going to open this rotation layer up. And since our blue tracer is in the right position, I'm just going to select the first keyframe and we're going to drag the circle right in the middle of that line. Click out of this nest sequence by hitting the X button up here, and then we're back into our original layer. I'm going to scroll down. I'm going to do the same steps for the other keyframe. Drag my blue tracer right into the middle here. We're going to double click into the nest sequence. We're going to select that layer, and then we're just going to select that second keyframe and just drag it right into the middle right here. And just like that, we've created a scale animation. All right, for our third animation with that kind of realistic bounce, we're just going to select our graphic. We're going to add a transform layer to it, drag our blue tracer to that 2-second mark, and then we're going to scroll down on the transform layer. We're going to select off this check mark and just crank that shutter angle to 360. Create a keyframe for the rotation and position. We're going to drag our blue tracer a little bit back, maybe about half a second or a little more. Change our rotation to 106. Change the position so this little circle goes up a little bit. I'd say right about there is good. We're going to go 1 frame to the left, so you can just use your arrow keys on your keyboard. So just go 1 frame to the left, and then we're going to create a keyframe for the position and for the rotation. And then we can just drag our blue tracer to the beginning of the animation and change this rotation to -297 and change this position, just scrolling it all the way down so we can no longer see that circle. We're going to select all these keyframes. We're going to right click temporal ease in, right click temporal ease out, and then we're going to open both of these layers up. So I'm just going to create that little arc with these keyframes, and I'm just going to try to get my blue tracer right in the middle of that circle, just adjusting it a little bit so it's a little easier to do. Go to the position, select that first keyframe, and we're going to match up that first keyframe with our rotation layer. Do that for the second keyframes as well. Match it up as close as possible, and then just kind of move it so it's in the center. Do the same with the position, and then we're just going to have to do it for these 2 keyframes on this side. So we can just drag these in a little bit closer, creating that mountain effect. Match it up with the line. Then we're just going to go to the rotation and do the exact same. Just match it up right here, and then do it for the final keyframe. Just match it up right there. And then one of the final steps, just zooming into these 2 keyframes that are right beside each other. Select the 2 on the right and then just drag them in so they're very close together. And then once you bring those 2 keyframes together, you can see we've created another great animation. And then for our last animation, we're just going to be selecting that layer. We're going to be adding a transform effect, and then we're also going to be adding a basic 3D effect as well. It's under perspective. Just going to double click on that one as well. So just make sure you guys are having the transform layer above the basic 3D layer. Otherwise, it will really mess up the animation. Nonetheless, I'm just going to drag my blue tracer to the 2-second mark. We're going to create a keyframe for the scale on the transform layer, and we're also going to create a keyframe for the tilt on the basic 3D layer. We're just going to get the smoothing out of the way, so just click that check mark off and crank the shutter angle to 360, and then we're just going to drag our blue tracer to the 0-second mark and change the tilt to 324, and then change the scale to 0. We're going to easy ease these keyframes, so select all 4 of them, right click ease in, and right click ease out. Now we're just going to have to smooth these keyframes out, so we're just going to drag both of these lines right into the middle, match it up with the blue tracer. We're going to match up the scale from the transform layer with the basic 3D layer. So we're going to open the tilt up, and we're going to select that first keyframe and just drag it right into the middle of that line. And then all we're going to have to do is the same thing for the second and final keyframe. Match it up here, and then we're just going to scroll down to the basic 3D and match it up here. And if you learned something new today, make sure you hit that subscribe button. But nonetheless, if you want to learn how to make a trippy text animation within Premiere Pro, click the video on the right. That's everything for me, guys. Peace out.